Welcome to the Zelos podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder. This week, I've got Gini Grimsley in the house with me. Ginny sits on the Executive Council. In fact, she is the chair of the NSCA's Professional Development Group for Personal Trainers. We're going to talk to her in just a moment. But before we get underway, remember, hey, we're getting down to the wire for CEUs. So if you need some, just check out my website. We've got some in-person and online courses that are easily acceptable for athletic trainers, personal trainers, strength coaches, chiropractors, and physical therapists. But while you're there, also, if you're looking for more education, go to satantacollege.com. They've got master's programs in applied sports biomechanics and movement science. We've also got programs in applied sport and exercise psychology. Then there's Masters of Science in Performance Coaching, as well as sports injuries and return to performance management. Just go to satantacollege.com, enter RS10 for 10% off tuition today. Follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder and click the subscribe button and enjoy the show. Ginny, thanks for coming on. We got a lot to talk about. So before we get underway, for those that aren't familiar with Ginny Grimsley, let's bring everybody up to speed. I've known you for a few years through the NSCA, but give us a little insight as to a little bit about where you grew up, you went to school, and your career path to this point.
Totally. I'll bring it full circle because I'm only about 3 hours from where I grew up now as an adult. So, grew up in a small town in North Carolina, just above the South Carolina border. Maybe 2,500 people. Went to a high school, played every sport they offered. Basically the kid of a coach. And I ended up going on to play basketball at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. Go Spartans, and they've got a good program up and going now. And so played overseas for a little bit, a couple stints in Germany, a stint in Spain, and then came back and decided, hey, maybe this whole basketball thing isn't quite for me. I was pretty successful. Again, not everyone gets to play college basketball, much less try their hand at professional basketball. And so I was like, well, I've kind of checked all those boxes. Let's get into the real world. Let's see how this is going to go. And my original thought was, I'll apply at these cardiac rehab programs. I applied at a couple different places. South Carolina is one I remember, and then Appalachian State. And I ended up choosing Appalachian State because at the time they had an awesome women's basketball program. I wasn't quite willing to give that dream up yet. So I was like, oh, maybe I could be a GA with the women's team while also doing my master's degree. And so I ended up going to Appalachian. I was the graduate assistant for both years that I was there. And I like to tease and say that's kind of where I learned my work ethic, even though I know that had kind of been built all along. But I mean, being a graduate assistant for the women's basketball team, doing my coursework, also during that time, because at the end of the 2 years, the goal was to sit for the ACSM clinical exercise physiologist certification or credential. And that took 600 hours of clinical time. So getting those hours in, being an intern and a graduate assistant in that program, like I was working pretty much nonstop. And when you're a GA, even at the mid-major Division I level, you're traveling with the team. So not only was I up, 5 a.m. to be at the cardiac rehab facility from 6 to 9, then from 10 to 2 in classes, and then 2 on was dedicated to basketball. Like those were long days. I know, like, again, I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I'm like, how on earth, as a 24-year-old, was I able to manage all that? But, I think I can thank goodness I had fitness coming out of basketball because I also didn't give that up. Like I was able to play pickup and work out and still kind of do that to, I think, maintain my sanity.
So I got to ask a question. Sorry, but cardiac rehab, you mentioned cardiac rehab, 24 years old, and you choose cardiac rehab. Like, I was not expecting that. So were there relatives in your family that had some kind of coronary artery disease or something like that? What inspired you to follow that particular discipline?
It's interesting. That was the track that my advisor at UNCG had taken and done their PhD in, and I was like, oh,
Ah,
that sounds cool. Like I could do that. It sounds like an easy 9 to 5. Like come in, help people exercise, do some of the testing and then be done with my day. Like, that sounds cool. But, at the
Nice.
same time, you're kind of torn between, well, I did hours in undergrad in the weight room with our strength coach, and like I thought that was really cool, but it seemed like the adult thing to do to go cardiac rehab because I don't know. It ended up going like I went back and forth a couple times. Like, well, let's do cardiac rehab. The
Cool.
interesting thing was at App, there were only a handful of courses that were different between the clinical route and the strength and conditioning route because there were two different cohorts that kind of went on at the same time. The guys that I knew that went on to be on the strength and conditioning side, one was a strength coach for the Houston Astros when they won the World Series a couple years ago. Another one works with USA Rugby. Like, it was a very successful cohort of folks that came out of my class, and I was like, well, if I ever need to go back, it's really, there was an extra nutrition course and I think a second muscle physiology course that I missed on because I went the cardiac rehab route. So I'm like, all right, really, the education isn't that different. If I wanted to go and do, strength and conditioning, I could. And so when I came out, there were two exams that I signed up for. One was the clinical exercise physiologist, with ACSM, and the other one was the CSCS. Um, Interestingly enough, I scored significantly higher. I passed both. First time, studied
Nice.
for a month or two, passed both.
That's
Um,
commendable because that doesn't always happen.
no, but I scored significantly higher on the CSCS than I did the CEP. And I was like, huh,
Hmm.
interesting. Just a note that I kept in the back of my head, like, well, I know all this stuff and I learned how to read EKGs and how to deal with clinical and subclinical populations and all of that. But at the same time, a lot of those concepts apply to strength and conditioning, and it's just a matter of degree, not full variation there. So anyway, after App, which if you haven't been to Boone, North Carolina in the fall, it is one of the most beautiful places on earth from about from Labor Day until October. Just the leaves change, hop on the Blue Ridge Parkway, just a plug for the area.
Hmm.
Um, and then from Boone, I got married and we ended up moving to the Denver area. And I don't know if most people know anything about Colorado. Colorado's a pretty healthy state. And so the need for cardiac rehab specialist, exercise physiologist was minimal. And so I was like, well, I need a job. And so I started personal training. I applied at a couple different places around the area. Ended up working at more of a country club style gym. It was basically a country club without the golf course. I had
Uh-huh.
tennis and swim and the typical high-end activities. And that's pretty much where I cut my teeth in training outside of working, helping with kids sports teams and some of that stuff. But that's pretty much where I cut my teeth training. Kind of grew through the ranks there, became a personal training manager, and then an opportunity with VASA came along for a director of team training, and I was like, well, this sounds interesting. I'll just apply for it. I'll see what it is. And I ended up getting hired at VASA and have been with them ever since. And that role evolved from just a director of team training to overseeing pretty much everything in those gyms that touches fitness, from trainer education, group fitness instructor education. And let me not forget to mention the team that I work with, who is awesome. They fill my gaps for sure. Um, but I run monthly webinars for these guys, like all the things that a robust support system should be is what I've tried to provide to the trainers who come through that system. Taking a look back, it's all the things that I didn't get as a new young trainer. And during that time, I got involved even more with the NSCA.
So, give me some examples as a young trainer, what you didn't have in terms of support or resource.
There was no formal sales training at all. It was just like, hey, I need you to hop out on the floor. Here's 15 hours a week for you to go do that. Go meet people, go ask them to train with you, get them signed up. That was it. I'm like, cool. I'll do my best.
Okay.
So that was one of the things, and that's kind of one of the things that makes or breaks a lot of young trainers, as I found over the years. And it's like, all right, well, there wasn't that. There was very little outside of, what you learn in your certification for how to program for people. How do you program for a 50-year-old female tennis player who's got some knee pain? How do you program for the 25-year-old recent college grad who's looking to put on some muscle? Like, how do you program for different people while maintaining sort of a systematic and scientific approach to it? And that took a lot of all of these things took a lot of trial and error. Um, and what I wanted to do was reflect on, okay, if I didn't get sales help, I didn't get programming help, I really didn't get any organizational, like not organizational, but organization help for time management, for record keeping, for any of those things. Yeah, I learned it during the study process, but there was no application. Like, how do I make sure new trainers who are coming through, no matter what credential they've sat for and now hold, have these things at their disposal to make that beginning part easier? And that's kind of been my task for the last few years.
Right on. That's great. And so here you are. You said you're going to take us full circle. You're in Colorado for a while, but now you just said you're 3 hours away from where you grew up.
3 hours away. Yep. So now I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. So about 3 hours south of where I grew up. So my partner took a role in the provost office at the Citadel. And so we've packed up, moved from Mile High to well below sea level. And so yeah, it's been an awesome change. I'm looking for my gym home. I've got my garage set up, but looking for kind of what that next step is, and kind of figuring out what the low country life is all about.
Wow, that's very good. And just a plug to Appalachia. It's just when I came in to the NSCA, this was over 30 years ago, and you had some of the juggernauts of the industry, of the association, the people that were at the national conferences giving all these lectures, and many of which were coming from that university. It seemed like, today I would say Springfield College would be comparable to that. But so you were surrounded by some amazing leaders in the field, would you say?
Oh my gosh, yeah. To be able say that I have Travis Triplett's phone number in my phone is awesome. Like, I took classes from Jeff McBride. Like, even the names that were there, excuse me, when I was coming through, they're still there and they're still putting out tons of research. And I want to say Travis is probably one of the most cited authors. So it's an awesome program for sure.
Okay, and so we got to talk about the NSCA a little bit because you head up the executive council for the personal training professional development group, right? The PDG. And we were hanging out during the national conference this past summer, like we've done in previous years, and just there's some things that you brought up that just made my jaw drop, such as the fact that we have lost in this nation over 100,000 personal trainers during COVID. It wasn't like they just went into their own garage or started training clients on their own in parks or anything. They left the industry. And then you also mentioned that. The those that get certified, a very, very high percentage don't stick it out. Even in the first year, they've just gone, okay, this isn't what I want, or this isn't for me, or maybe it's too hard. I don't know what's going on with all that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think a lot of industries experience the same thing of people who are on the fence of, I'm doing okay, I'm not making a killing, but I'm kind of content with what I'm doing. COVID was kind of the straw that broke them to say, you know what, maybe I need to go try my hand at something else. And so when you look at turnover rates during that period, personal training experience, depending on the source you're looking at, somewhere between 100 and 150% turnover, meaning we lost up to 50% more than we were able to rehire um, during that time period. So yeah, somewhere between 100 to 200,000 personal trainers are no longer personal trainers. Now, some did go from big boxes to either a private facility or their garage. That was part of it. But really, it's that group in the middle that that weren't doing so hot are the ones that turned over. And if you look since then, and this has been the case forever, I think when I started almost 15 years ago, it was 7 out of 10 trainers didn't make it to the 1 year mark. And now we're looking at closer to 9 out of 10 not making it. And it doesn't matter what credential they hold. If they go what we'll call it for-profit, a gold standard, they experience the same amount of turnover as the NSCA CPT, which is a not-for-profit credentialing organization, and everywhere in between. What we've found, and I think a lot of our peers in the industry would agree, is that folks coming out of sitting for a credential and passing it aren't even minimally qualified to do the job of personal trainer. They're minimally credentialed, meaning this is step one of many to becoming a high-performing personal trainer. But yeah, they understand a little bit about the body. They understand a very small amount about business. I know I need to train clients to make money is about all they understand. And it's like we're basically getting these very green professionals, and I'll speak from the big box side of things, that they learn one way how to do it in their certification, but when it comes to applying in different situations, because they've just memorized the content and haven't learned it, they're lost. And unless there's mentorship or some sort of leadership and management guidance, they attrit out at a really high rate.
Yeah, I'll speak from the private sector in the small facilities and just agree with you. I mean, I just tell people that are coming in that are newly certified, you know, just enough to be dangerous now. That's perfect. So now let's talk about a little bit more about the actual people that are coming in here that are looking for help and not only getting stronger, but the majority of clients these days are going to have some type of orthopedic issue, whether chronic or acute. And yes, by all means, refer out whenever possible. But then what are you going to do in the confines of the gym, even though you're referring out? And you can get some guidance from a physical therapist, athletic trainer, even a chiropractor, massage therapist, anybody in your stakeholder realm. But honestly, these days, as technology continues to advance and the remote working from home continues to increase, we're going to see people at younger and younger ages with more orthopedic issues. And these are not necessarily being addressed in most of the certifications. And if they are, they're special certifications, like a special population, but it's not, here's when you become a trainer or strength coach. It's more geared toward the people that are at a higher level of functionality, athletes or regularly active individuals, right?
You know what? I'm glad you brought up the term special populations. Like if you look at it 20 years ago, when I was going through my undergrad program, it was special populations are people who are outside of the norm, right?
Now they are the norm.
Now they are the norm. And so technically your special populations are you and me, who are relatively healthy, relatively low risk to anything chronic, whether it be orthopedic, metabolic, cardiovascular, like any of those things. Now we've become the special population, yet the credentials have failed to keep up with the changing landscape. And so if we're talking about serving a minority, then there has to be continuing education on how do we now serve the majority. And I think that's where a lot of trainers, it's so funny. So I proofread all of the personal trainer bios that go up on VASA's website, right? I proofread them, and it always makes me giggle a little bit when I read, I work with motivated individuals who are ready to change, and da 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 da. We have a pretty standard script that these guys follow. And I'm like, you are not in a very shallow pond here, friend. You're way out deep. You're fishing for the big one, because those don't happen that often. Yeah, you have some people who come in first of the year ready to crush it, but then it's like, okay, that's not going to last. And so there's a little bit of setting more realistic expectations with these young trainers as well.
Yeah, I don't want to say that we have to dumb down because that would be an improper way, but we've got to meet people where they are when they walk through the door.
Mhm.
And we're not going to, I mean, the romantic idea of working with top level pro athletes, NCAA is, I think, a very that's the thought of a lot of trainers when they're thinking about it, whether it's professional mountain bikers or NBA players or whatever. But truly, the majority of your clients are going to be uh, wide range ages, and they're just going to want to feel better. And the programs that we have been taught in regards to how to design it, like you say, we are not we're not focusing our attention on truly what they need. It's based on previous information on a demographic that does not reflect those individuals walking through the door. So
Yeah,
how are you
and
changing it?
you
I know
know,
you are. I know you are. You are one. That's why I have you on because you know so much within the industry and you know the missing pieces. So how do we fill in the gaps, Ginny?
it, it was a realization I had a couple years ago, and it comes from I don't even know where my friend Cliff got it from, but Cliff Harsky, who works for Pain Free Performance, said this, and I was like, "Holy crap! This is it. This is one of my missing links that I need to go and share." He said the human body. The funny thing about humans is that we're all like snowflakes, right? Everyone's a snowflake
Hmm.
because you're looking at it microscopically, and if you look at a snowflake microscopically side by side, there's no one snowflake that is exactly like the other. Very similar to humans. But as soon as you zoom out, all snowflakes look alike. If you zoom out, all humans have the same qualities that need to be trained. And so, yes, there may be some snowflakes that have harder, sharper angles on them. There may be some that are softer and rounder, more octagonal. However you want to describe that, you can apply that analogy to the human body. You may have some who are really fit, really defined muscles, jacked, tan, the whole nine. And then you have the opposite end of that and everywhere in between. And so if you look at the qualities that that everyone needs, it's starting to fill the gaps of what they don't have. If someone is really great on the endurance and stamina side, the cardiovascular side of training, but they don't have basic levels of strength, then that's where you attack to enhance what they're stronger at. And I think sharing that with some of my trainers was a little bit eye-opening in that they're like, wait a minute, you're telling me there's these 10, 8 to 10 things that need to happen for everyone to enjoy a strong, healthy body. Yes. But if you look at where everybody's scored, it's going to be scored a little bit differently. And so them understanding, oh, well, maybe I don't need to train them in the big three. Maybe I don't need to squat, bench, and dead them in every session. Yeah, probably not a good idea. But to your point, meeting them where they are and helping to raise each of those 10 qualities over time, not all at once, but over time, that gives you different goals to work towards. And so that thought gave them a little bit more structure of, okay, this is how I'm going to train a client who comes in with me for the first 4 weeks, because first 4 weeks is more of that acclimation phase. And so that thought spurred a lot of the resources that I have provided for the trainers. And I think I've shared some of this in the PDG Facebook group and I haven't shared in the LinkedIn group yet, but it's like, if we think about it, don't worry about sets and reps and percent loading and all of that stuff. That's the nuance. But if you look at it on a large macro scale, um, that's your starting point. And then, you know, titrating down to exactly what that person needs in that moment and working towards a goal that makes sense and is tangible, and that can be easily reached. And so I think that's part of the work that I've been doing is like, guys, it's not that complicated. It actually is very simple what we're trying to do. We're trying to get people to move more, eat a
Yep.
little bit better, sleep really well, and not have to worry about, their bodies breaking down on them in the most important moments of their lives.
Yeah, I think that it was years ago, but somebody had made a comment that we're losing the war on obesity. I didn't know we were at war, to be honest, but at that time, but I thought about it more, and it stuck with me because I realized that, we're coming at these problems, shall we say, these scenarios with uh, antiquated philosophies and antiquated approaches, and uh, there needs to be a shift in how we view these things. And and honestly, if we consider it, like you say, special populations now make up the majority. People that are in the category of being overweight or obese or morbidly obese, they make up the majority. Right. So from a business perspective, if we're looking to work with the highly motivated individuals, like you say, we're only going after a small percentage from a business perspective. Like we- we're only going after, if you were a shoe salesman, you're only going after the people that want to have the best and the brightest shoes that are out there, and you're not looking at the people that are shoeless or the ones that don't really care about what type of shoes they have. They just want to have something on their feet. I mean, that's such a bigger market. And from a business perspective, because we've both been in business quite a while, it would just make sense if we were able to focus our attention in an effective manner to the population that has now become the majority. So there's some governmental things that are trying to come through, right? There's some bills that are halfway through. The one I'm thinking of is the PHIT Act, PHIT. It's been through one level of Congress. It's awaiting the next level, depending upon how the future administration and the future Congress is looking right now. I'm kind of curious how that might end up. But give me your foresight or your insight, if you would, on the FIT Act and any other kind of legislation that you're kind of intrigued about.
Yeah, the FIT Act is interesting. It's a part of it's not called Operation 465 or whatever the number is for state representatives. That's a different movement. 435. It is the FIT Act is for youth sports, so funding for youth sports, being able to use your HSA, FSA, I believe, to fund youth sports, but also to then be able to use those funds for gym memberships, personal training, group classes, things that get you moving. I think there are a couple things written into it, which I think is part of the holdup that, as tricky as Washington can be, there's some things trying to be snuck through the legislation portion, which is slowing it down. But if it were to pass, it could open more opportunities for folks to afford a gym membership, to get their kids into that extra sport that keeps them active longer throughout the year. Like there's different ways of utilizing this, and it's based around the idea of becoming more active, which is part of the problem to solve. The other part of the problem to solve is the food industry or the food-like substance industry. You
Food
know,
like substance. I like that.
and so that's the other piece. We have these highly palatable, very low satiability because you just want to eat more. You're never satisfied. So if we're not moving and we're over consuming, the result or the final symptom of that is this idea of obesity, where 44% of American adults are overweight, sorry, morbidly obese, and then another 30 are obese. So we've got 3 out of every 4 adults who are overweight or obese. There's your majority. Throw
Yeah, just
another,
walk around Disney World. You'll greatly see that right now.
I know, I always catch grief on this if I post anything on social media about go to your local Walmart on Saturday. Like that is the snapshot of the American health picture, right? That is it. Disney World's another great example. And it's one of those things where we're looking at this symptom and trying to treat the symptom, but we're not treating the root cause. And what some of these bills would do is help to treat the root cause of physical inactivity, and hopefully over the next few years would be something to address the food situation, where we're actually not in a situation where folks are in a food desert. I think that's a little bit of a misnomer. It is a um, caloric density desert, or I guess you could call it a calorie jungle, where all of these processed foods are there, they're plentiful, and people are consuming them because that's what's in their face. And so that's a lot of what the personal training industry is up against, because, you talk to anyone and they're like, nope, you got to eat mostly whole foods, you got to drink your water, you've got to move your body, get your steps in, and do all that. But without the support of government, because that's what turns the wheel, it's not going to happen. So if the FIT Act could get passed, that would be at least one small step in the right direction for helping the fitness professional, but also the industry as a whole, because you're opening those opportunities to get more people active.
Well, it's interesting. Not that we have to go too deep into this hole, but it is a disease. It is a I would say pandemic. It's it gets to a point where it becomes pathological. Sure,
Mhm.
you can gain a few pounds and so on, and it's very easy to do in our culture, but left to their own devices, individuals will continue down that journey until it becomes actually a physiological kind of a pathological issue. So we can take it from the physiological model and exercise, eat right, sleep. But then there's also this mental, emotional, and perhaps even spiritual component. And I honestly think that is where we, as trainers, as fitness professionals, could delve deeper into and not become counselors or psychologists or anybody like that, but just start to filter in, just like we're filtering in some flexibility, and we're not always just lifting weights. We're putting in a little bit of cardio. We're putting in a little suggestion on their meal plans. And we're encouraging them to wear some type of ring or smart device that tracks their sleeping hours. We can also start to incorporate a little bit more in the realm of emotional well-being and spiritual connection, if you will, so that we're because I think that is a big part of it. And I don't think that fat shaming within the media or anywhere else is doing us any good, because uh, it's it's not addressing the underlying issue, which is actually a diseased state of being.
Yeah, and obesity is a comorbidity. I mean, you look at the other chronic illnesses that typically come along
Right?
with it. You've got type 2 diabetes, you've got metabolic syndrome, you've got cardiovascular disease, you've got peripheral artery disease. All of these things, a lot of times, come along with, hold on, let's go ahead and throw the orthopedic stuff in there. Carrying around
Sure.
an extra 30, 40, 50, 100 pounds of weight. What is that doing to your hips, knees, ankles, and low back? Right? So all of these things, while they are certainly a disease state, they're manageable without medication. Like if you think about it, the more you move, you're going to lower your blood pressure, you're going to lower your resting heart rate. You're probably going to expend more calories than you normally would. So when people hear disease, they often think of, well, I need to go to my doctor and I need to get a pill or a shot now,
Yeah.
or something along those lines to address it. When in reality, the physical and spiritual and mental side all commingle and work together, and it can be done just with a little bit of movement a couple times a week, which is so wild that that's the barrier to entry. But folks will opt for the easier, all right, I'm gonna take a pill, and hope that it gets better, which last time I checked, hope wasn't a very good plan. But
Yeah, and not to sound like a conspiracy theorist or anything, but when the food industry and the pharmacological industry find a way to generate profit from people taking less of some of their products, then we might see some change. I mean, watching TV the other night, I commented on like, "Oh, here comes a drug commercial," and then the very next one was a drug. There were four commercials all about prescription medication that you had to consult your doctor with, and they were all lifestyle management prescriptions, whether it was your cholesterol, your high blood pressure, if you've got irritable bowel, if you've got whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't want to be a, a I don't want to be pessimistic in any way, but we've got some forces at play that are generating billions upon billions of dollars that we're we're going at odds with if we're trying to increase their nutritional content and reduce their need for prescription medication.
Yeah, and we'll see where the semaglutides and tirzepatides and the GLP agonists go with that, because the the food-like substance industry is going to have an answer for it. The, the- they're while they work together, they're also at odds with each other. Of, all right, well, this suppresses hunger and the urge or the cravings to eat these highly palatable foods. What does that drive the food producers to create even more highly palatable foods that now the drugs have to keep up with. So I don't see that ending well at all.
And this is not exclusive to the general population. I mean, talking with a host of other guests in the past about nutrition and
Mhm.
sleep. I mean, if you're working with athletes of any level, any caliber, you're having to address these same issues, whether it's fast food, whether it's sleepless because of travel, and just prescription medication, all these things. It's just so inherent. It's rampant across the spectrum.
But let's go back to the snowflake analogy, because I like where we're going with this.
Okay.
You've got your high performing athlete. You have your, we'll call them general population. We know them to be special, but that's okay. We're all special snowflakes in this analogy. Zoom in, very different edges, right? But if we zoom out, unless these snowflakes are doing the basics of sleep, doing the basics of nutrition, doing the basics of stress management, they're not going to perform to their highest level. What I think a lot of people end up doing, and I'm sure the high performing athletes are just as guilty of this as the, everyday person, is they seek these supplemental things, whether it's an actual supplement or the cooling sheets or, you know, the adjustable bed, or, the night eye covers with the white noise in the back, and like all of these things. But unless they have the basics of, I have a set sleep and set wake time, I have a sleep hygiene protocol that I follow prior to that, like these extra things don't really do anything unless the foundations are set. And those same rules apply to the general population. You can't see the benefit of the GLP-1, we'll beat up on that for a little bit, unless you have the foundational pieces of eating enough protein, getting fiber and the micronutrients in via your diet. It's not going to be as effective as it would be unless you've got the basics dialed in. And so a lot of folks, whether they're the high performers or the everyday person, they jump to the cool, sexy thing at the moment without worrying about the basics. And I think that's a step that a lot of personal trainers skip as well when they're talking to their client. Like, your job as the coach and the trainer is get your clients excited about the basics, and they'll forget about the cool, sexy thing they saw on Instagram. Master the basics, master those foundational pieces, and let's build that from there. Because if you don't have that, you can't really do any of the other cool stuff.
Right on. Okay. Well, we could talk for hours on that, of
Yes.
course, right? We can just keep on going. But these are some of the topics that we're talking about in the personal trainers development group. So I want to open up some time here and
Sure.
try and encourage anyone within the health and fitness arena to check out the personal trainers development group. It's on LinkedIn. And yes, it's through the NSCA, but I think we would welcome anyone, because we're trying to raise all the boats with the tide, and we're trying to raise the tide. So whether you're an athletic trainer, strength coach on teams or for athletes, or you're a personal trainer like myself who's got their brick and mortar for so many years, I mean, there's quite a collection of professionals of different aspects of industry, which is wonderful because we can come at these issues and support each other, and then support the ones that are new to it. But Here's our time to shine some light on the PDG. Give us a lowdown. Being the president and all.
Oh man. All right. So let's talk about the group, the executive council first, because I think the work that we do couldn't be done without those people on it, right? And when I took the chair position over a few years ago, um, it was sort of a group that had some really good pieces, but we needed to add some folks to build out the true working group. And so with that, we now currently have two academics slash researchers. So we have AJ Mortara out of Berea College in Kentucky, and we have Susie Reiner, who's a researcher at the University of Kentucky. Those two are some of the smartest people I have ever met, and they have a passion for educating personal trainers. Then we have Joshua Dillaha, who is a private studio owner down in rural Arizona. He's a former Marine, and he kind of focuses on the tactical side of things. So he's got, the personal training and the tactical groups that he works with. Joseph Sudamak is a post-baccalaureate instructor, and I can't remember the name of the school he's at. He's also in the Phoenix area. But when it comes to mentorship, like that's kind of his area of focus and getting folks connected with others. Gustavo Ramos most recently worked at a private studio in Tallahassee, Florida. He's now doing professional development work out on his own, both for other industries as well as gyms. Oh gosh, who am I missing? That might be it. And then me. I cover the commercial side of things. And so the way we kind of look at personal training, we have all come to the conclusion that personal training is a little bit of a misnomer in that within the NSCA, personal training is like, oh, you guys are a bunch of personal trainers. You don't work with real athletes. When in reality, we hold the credential personal trainer, but we work with as many athletes as your typical CSCS does who works in the collegiate and professional settings. Again, it just depends on where they are. They could be high school, they could be home for the summer. The personal training name captures a lot of different things. It's the strength and conditioning coach who works in a sports performance facility. They don't land in the collegiate realm or the pro realm because they don't work for the team. They are a standalone facility. And so we kind of encompass all of those folks, and we want to make sure that we've got at least some sort of representative on the executive council so that we know what's going on in each of the areas, from academia to research to private facilities to commercial facilities and kind of everywhere in between. And so that's kind of how I've built out the executive council, so that when I rotate off here in a couple of years, we'll be able to kind of carry on that work of representing our constituents. It seems like a pretty simple process, but it's taken a while to find those folks who want to go and do that work. And with the NSCA's 3-year plan that they just came out with, it really falls on us to make sure that we're engaging with the participants in the professional development group, because you can, as an NSCA credential holder, you can join any of the special interest groups, you can join any of the professional development groups, and this serves as a network to connect people within the industry. And what we're trying to foster in the LinkedIn space is that conversation, whether you're new to the training side of things or you've been doing it for many, many years. How can we connect those two endpoints and continue the conversation, whether it's through mentorship or just solving a problem together? And that's the work that we've been doing up to now, and the work that we're going to continue, hopefully with a little bit more of the mentorship side of things, so that we can start to develop that next generation of fitness professionals.
And speaking of the next generation, what's encouraging is that if you go to a lot of the conferences, which I know you do, you're starting to see that we've got new faces in there. The younger generation is understanding the importance of face-to-face contact, of social networking, of not social but like professional networking within these conferences. And that was the thing this past year that made my heart skip a beat. I'm like, wow, there's so many first timers coming to these conferences that they are, maybe they're a little bit tired with online educational platforms, and they have never experienced what a in-person conference is like. And now that they have, they're blown away. They're sold. They're going to come back next year, at least the ones that I talked to. And it's just so encouraging because we need that physical interaction, that interpersonal relationship built up instead of across from a screen. We need to actually be in a room together and feel the energy. So this coming year, we've got Kansas City, Missouri, right? We've got the national conference for the NSCA, and it looks like they're opening up some presenters or topics that are going to be a lot more dedicated to the personal training industry, and we won't be just exclusively an online conference every October or so, which is really nice. It's a great change of pace within the leadership and the structure within the NSCA, and it keeps me coming back year after year. So that's great.
Yeah, it's an awesome shift considering that the private sector makes up the majority of membership within the NSCA. And I
Right?
get it. Like the online component is as important as the in-person component from a CEU standpoint because you have to get the units to maintain your credential. I totally get that. And because private sector is dictated by client schedules and gym schedules and all of that, it's a little bit harder sometimes to get to some of the in-person events that are
Yeah,
that
financially,
totally.
to close down your operations and take a few days off, plus the travel and the hotel and
Oh
the
my gosh.
registration costs, it adds up. But that's an investment. And you get a huge return on that investment if you just make it.
Right. And so you've got a couple different ways to get the in-person, like to experience the in-person. So you've got the online, but then you have your state and regional clinics, which a lot of people forget about those. I've been to, I'd say probably the last 8 Colorado state clinics, and I've met someone new that I've connected with every single time. And
Right on.
it's turned into something that I look forward to every year. So this year, South Carolina gets a dose of me. But the in-person, they're not super expensive. They're a max 2 to 3 hours away from most people. And it's just a great opportunity to meet people who are local to you. And when you do get the opportunity to save up your pennies and shut down shop for a couple days, the national conferences are so fantastic because now not only are you experiencing the local reach because you'll run into people that you've met at the state and regional clinics, but now you're exposed to some of the bigger names in the industry and you can rub shoulders with them. The most important thing for me, I think, and you probably feel the same way, is I can go sit in some of the sessions and get something from it, but I get more from the conversations in between of being able to meet my peers, spend some time, pick their brains, like just get to hear what's going on. And that has become something that I find sometimes more valuable than the credits that I get for sitting in the sessions. And so I think there's lots of opportunities for both because you never know who you're going to need to call on. Like at any
Truly.
point, I could pick up the phone, I can call you, I can call, Jeff Young, who's huge on the medical fitness side of things and very active in the NSCA. Like you get to meet some of these people that you never know when you're going to need them, but when you do, they're going to answer the phone. And for a young trainer, that is invaluable to be able to say you have those resources.
Yeah, you don't find that happening across all the industries. The
Mhm.
approachability of those that have been here and the willingness to share is huge. You'll find me at the exhibit hall at a table, like sitting down over where the away where everyone's kind of just chatting or checking their phones, because that's honestly that's the price of admission for me. Or in the special interest groups, hanging out with people like yourself and checking out what's coming down the road. But the networking is tremendous. It's tremendous. I do like the lectures, I like the presentations, but more often than not, I'll probably just get one, maybe two in a day, and then I'm going to go and just learn as much as I can from the people that are in attendance.
And if
Huge,
you're a hungry young coach, I mean, like actually hungry, you're served breakfast, lunch, and a happy hour most days.
right?
That's
Yeah,
that's with your ticket. And so if you're like, well, wait a minute, I don't have to buy breakfast and I'm done, sign me up, then these
here
are
we go.
the events for you.
All right. So we're going to see your face on LinkedIn as well as a whole bunch of the other executive council members on a
Hmm.
weekly basis as you provide video content, little snippets to help the up and coming trainers and those that are already established, just giving more content. And I really appreciate that. I'm looking forward to that. And I really appreciate you for coming on here. This has been great. I can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you for having me, Rocky. It's fun for you and I to catch up, but to
Heck
be
yeah.
able to share my passion, like this is what it's all about.
And that'll do it for us. Thank you, Ginny, for coming on. I love chatting with you, and I can't wait for our next conversation. And remember, if you need CEUs, go to my website. Check out the online courses that we have. And there's even a free one there that you can check out what it is we do. Remember, Setanta College is the place to go to get your Master's of Science in different tracks. Just go to setantacollege.com. Remember, you get that 10% off tuition if you enter the code RS10. And we'll see you next week.